Welcome to a very special live edition of the Cross Border Interviews with Chris Brown. We are covering the Quebec election results, and who better to do that with than our friends of the show, Dan Harris and Sarah Biggs. Dan, Sarah, welcome to the show. Looking forward to discussing this amazing election that I think happened, because I'm not really sure if anyone actually was paying attention. I would say outside of Quebec, but let's be honest, I spoke to some people in Quebec and some of them weren't even paying attention. But Dan, Sarah, thank you so much for doing this. Before we get started, I guess we have to say the big news, and I think it comes to no surprise because we put it on Twitter and every other news outlet has put it up. Francois Legault has secured his second majority government. That's right. The Premier of Quebec is heading back to the National Assembly with what looks like there are still seats outstanding. It looks like it's going to be a larger majority government than he had going into this election. Let's start there. Dan, you are a man in Quebec. Are you shocked? Are you surprised? Is there anything that this election... Yep. I apologize right here, right now. I'm pretty sure no one just heard you say that, Dan, because my audio wasn't configured properly. So let's try that again. Are you shocked? Are you
Let's
surprised?
see how well I can repeat myself. I think the biggest shock was that it took a whole 10 minutes for the media to report CAC majority. This was not a surprise, I think, for anybody that was paying attention to the election. It was just a question, going to be a question of how big was the margin. And in fact, they've increased their popular support from 2018. They're pretty close to 50% of the popular support, which is not something that very many governments do. And especially with all the opposition parties around, maybe some folks had difficulty picking which one of them to select. But yeah, I don't think it's very surprising. The thing that I see that's maybe a little disappointing is an even more rightward shift overall of things in Quebec, because you have the Conservatives on the right of La CAQ, who have now gone from 1.3 to 12 point something percent, while the CAQ has also increased their popular support. So it might signal more of a shift in Quebec on a grander scale than just in the election.
Sarah, what about yourself? Are you? I could tell by your shocked look when I announced that Francois Legault was going to be premier again that you are totally taken back by this whole news that he is back, and he is back in a bigger and bolder way.
Yeah. Well, we were all expecting it. Like the polls were pretty bang on that one. They've been predicting like 92 seats for them for, I would say, at least 2 weeks. But what I find fascinating is that if you look at the political environment we're living in right now, a lot of anti-vaxxers, convoys, freedom of speech and all that. The government that has imposed the most stringent restrictions is being reelected with almost 50% of the vote. Like Alberta, we have a problem. Like it's I'm walking into a leadership election on Thursday, and we'll see what the results are. But it's with all the protest and all the people that were saying no, we want our freedoms back. And when I went home, it was during the vax pass and all that, and they were really, really strict. Like everybody was. It was so stringent, and they're getting back in with 92 seats. It's like Schrodinger's syndrome or something. I'm having a hard time. It's maybe because Alberta's a little broken, or maybe the CAC had a really, really good communication process during COVID. I don't know, but I'm really trying to understand. And that's a fascinating part for me because we have the Conservative Party on the federal level. There's so like freedom and we don't have to coerce into vaccination, blah, blah, blah. And then Quebec just went and voted for the party and the premier. And that was like, you need to go get vaccinated if you want to go somewhere. So I find it quite fascinating.
We're going to be talking
Uh,
about the federal implications of this vote in a few seconds, but I want to stick on to the big news of the night, and that is the CAC has, and Francois Legault as premier has extended his lead. I'm looking at these results, and I'm just going to read at dissolution right now. The CAC had 76 seats. They're leading and elected, according to CBC and CTV, 92 seats. The party, the Liberal Party, or the party Liberal, whatever you want to call them. Sorry, I don't know their official title in French. They had 27 seats. They are down to leading and elected in 19. The Quebec Solidaire had 10 seats at dissolution. They are leading and elected in 11, so they're up one seat. The Parti Québécois had 10 seats at dissolution. They are leading and elected in only 2. And the Parti Conservative had 1 seat at dissolution. They had a former CAC member leave the party, join the Conservative Party, and as of right now, they are not leading and elected. They have been going back and forth in one riding, but they're not leading and elected. To officially have party status in the National Assembly in Quebec, you need 12 seats. It looks like if the Quebec Solidaire doesn't do this, we will have a 2-party system that will be going into this National Assembly. Is this bad for democracy when party official status is 12 and we have a party who's at 11? I just want to know, Dan, Sarah, who wants to take that here?
Well, I think these things, these rules that are put in place are always subject to change, and how the current government usually wants to operate things. If they want to give Quebec Solidaire status when they have 11 seats instead of 12, they'll find a way to do that. And I would say they would probably want to do that in order to further diminish the Liberals. But this will be a calculation that they do after the fact. Most provinces have somewhere around a threshold of 12, and if most of the time, if you get somewhere close, most governments have been amenable to putting that in, but there's been other times where they haven't been. The Quebec Solidaire is perhaps the only party that's been overall tracking in a different direction in Quebec than la CAQ. And they might not want to give any more airtime or space to Quebec Solidaire in order to be able to better advance their own message.
So sorry to interrupt. I want to throw this out here for a second because I did an interview on Thursday with a gentleman who does a podcast in Quebec to get prepared for this because I relatively watched this election campaign, but I did not realize the Quebec Solidaire is basically a separatist movement within the party. Is that correct?
Within the party, do you mean within
the province? I mean within the province.
Within the province, yes.
Yeah.
I did not know this. This is huge news to me.
They are officially separatists, but it's not something they're generally focused on. And I mean, for progressives like myself, that's always a little bit of the dilemma because, Quebec Solidaire, they hit all the right marks on all of my progressive values. The one mark that they don't hit for me is separation from Canada. But they have typically viewed it more as the negotiating chip that separation can be. The threat of separation, if you don't take us seriously, if you don't take our values and our needs and our concerns to heart, speaking to the federal government, then we can always go our own way. And I think that's where a lot of folks like me, and you just have to look at the one lone NDP MP that's left in Quebec, Alexandre Boulris, has been a longtime strong supporter of Quebec Solidaire, a fact that the Conservatives federally mentioned, I think, something like 200 times in the House of Commons between 2011 and 2015. And they always got the numbers wrong, too. That's what was kind of funny. And if you look at where Quebec Solidaire is doing well in Montreal, it's mostly all around his riding. So there's certainly strong progressive values there that can build outwards. But yeah, I mean, the fact that they are separatists is the thing that always throws me and all the other New Democrats off. But we're not going to go and vote for a right-wing party just to own separation, right?
True. Sarah, I'm going to throw it over to you for a second because you grew up in Quebec. Shocker. You are a bilingual Albertan now. I can say that.
Bilingual.
Bilingual. Yeah. The status quo of Quebec politics is forever changed now because in the 80s, in the 90s, it was Parti Québécois or the Parti Québécois or the Quebec Liberals. It went back and forth. The CAQ have completely blown this up because this is the first time since 2008 a party has been reelected. We had John Charest, then we had Marion Poulin, and then we had Philippe Couillard. I forget his last name. Yep, and then we had Francois Legault. Are we seeing the end of the dynasties within Quebec here? Are we seeing the Quebec Liberals and the Parti Québécois completely done because of the CAQ?
No, so we're going through cycles, right? In the 40s and the 50s, there was no say, si tu votes bleu, tu vas au ciel, si tu votes rouge, tu vas en enfer.
For the English people in the group.
If you vote blue, you're going to heaven. If you vote red, you're going to hell. That was being told. Like my grandparents
support the Nordiques or the Canadians.
Like the Habs are the Nordiques. Like if you take the Habs, you're fine. If you take the Nordiques, well, I'm sorry, you shit out of luck. But my grandparents, my grandfather, the ones that adopted my mother, they grew up on a farm on the south shore of Montreal where it was really, really conservative. My grandparents were conservatives. My grandmother ran for Joe Clark in 1980, like super conservative. I think we're just seeing a cycling through. And I think that in a few years, they're going to have enough of what we're seeing now. And then we're going to go back again. Is it an anomaly what's happening today? Yes. Am I surprised? Yes. Is it over for the rest? I don't think so. I don't think it's over quite yet. Maybe for now. Maybe they're going to be able to, after like we're going to see what's going to happen at the federal elections as well. But, it's always a cycle. It's always a cycle, like Quebec goes super right or goes super left or then settles for the middle for 10 years. Because if you look, you had like the Crédit, then you have this like Duplessis, the ultra-conservatives. Then you went to Bourassa, and then after that, you had René Lévesque, and after that you went back to Bourassa. And after that, we went with Parizeau and Bouchard and Marois. And then after that, we went on for 10 years of Liberals. So I think we just like to cycle through our parties like we're cycling through shoes.
You bring up the big name, and that's Bourassa. I'm just looking at the results here. And before we started live, I found this statistic just to make sure. The last time a governing party in Quebec had more than 90 seats was back in 1989 when Robert Broussard, I apologize, his last name, won 92 seats. He won 99 in 1985, and then he won 102 in 1973. So this is not an unusual election where we're seeing a high seat count for the governing party. It's an interesting election, to say the least. I want to talk about. Go ahead, Dan.
I was just going to say, I mean, it is an anomaly, but at the same time, it's not. Yes, we're definitely on that cycle where there's ups and downs. But if you look at where, say, the conservative chunk of Quebec has gone, that was less so under Parizeau, but it was still there. More so under the next two Quebec premiers. Then that more conservative bunch shifted over to the Liberals because Couillard, and like Charest is not exactly a progressive. He was just ran for the Conservative leadership again and federally. So, it has been generally a more conservative lined government that's been in power under various forms over the last several decades. And I think what's the big difference right now is with La CAQ going out of their way to get out of the separatism business. I think that's the thing that's perhaps changing the most, that as those Quebecers that remember separation in all those years, as they age and eventually age out, that, young Quebecers don't want to talk about that. They care about the bread and butter issues and the economy and what's going on in front of them. And La CAQ certainly plays to that. So they, and I mean, La CAQ, I think they navigated the pandemic pretty well. Yes, they had the most stringent rules in general, but you know what? They were also generally consistent.
Yes.
Yeah.
The other provinces were all over the place. Now, Doug Ford managed to get reelected despite all of his back and forth.
Yeah.
You're segueing into my
Quebec,
next topic, Dan.
All right, then I'll stop and let you go there and then come back to it.
Yeah, let's talk about that, because this is the second election now in the two largest provinces in our confederation, Ontario and Quebec, where the foregone conclusion before the election was even called, we knew what was going to happen. I asked this question to my husband earlier on tonight, and he gave me this politician answer, and I kind of scoffed at him, and I said, I want true answers. I want true answers. Then I realized I'm talking to a political insider and a former politician, so this is going to be a fun, exciting moment here. So I'm going to ask this question. Have our politics become so
stupid?
Not stupid, but so unenthusiastically relevant that people just don't even care anymore. It's superficial. Yeah. Are we?
People are tired.
Are we at the point right now where we will look at the polls and say, okay, if this team is going to win, let's just vote for this team. And we don't care about the issues anymore. Because, again, I talked to people in Quebec during this election, and they said there was not that many issues that they could define what this election was about. And in Ontario, it was the exact same thing. You could go talk to anyone, and they can say, what's the issue? And they'll go, do you like Doug Ford or you do not? Do we like Premier Legault or do we not? Have our politics become stale and we just care about polls and don't care about the actual policies anymore? Dan, Sarah? Sarah, let's go with you.
Well, it's too bad the leadership elections on Thursday, because I could have used a good example for that. But very often when people are tired, policies won't matter anymore. It's the quick 3-second soundbite that it's like, right now, I would qualify it as political ADHD, because we're so tired. We're out of COVID. We went through 2 federal election in how long? And, it's kind of political ADHD. It's like, oh, gas rebate. Oh, $400 check. Oh, they're going to lower my taxes. And it's those 3-second soundbite policy that people will remember these days, because everybody's back to normal with their kids. We're catching up on work. We're sick of traveling to work. Everybody's so busy because we're trying to catch up so much on life that even if you put good policy out there, unfortunately, very often the stupid problems come up, and that's what people will worry about. You cannot have, I would argue these days that it's very, very, very difficult to have an intelligent conversation on policy because people don't want to hear about it. So that's why I call it political ADHD. It's like, oh yeah, independence, yeah, sovereignty, yeah, police force, yeah. It's sound bites that people will be able to relate to and that they don't have to put too much thoughts into it.
Dan, you were on the ground during those last 36 days. I'm going to get back to you here, Sarah, and I want to talk about that soundbite that Sarah was just talking about. Until, I would say, the last week of this campaign, when immigration took an ugly turn from foot and mouth disease from your immigration minister and your premier, was anything really talked about on the ground in the riding that you reside in? Was there an issue that this campaign was fought on, or was this Okay, how big of a majority are we going to give for Legault?
In my area, the big question, honestly, that I was hearing a few people talk about, and not even many, wasn't even an issue about my riding. It's the riding next door that's actually had a Liberal incumbent for a while. Is she going to be able to hold on to her seat or not? Amidst this like large CAC wave. So yeah, it wasn't even an issue. The only issue I heard talk about during the election campaign really was the third link in Quebec City, about Quebec City itself, and people elsewhere were talking about it because, of course, it's a multi-billion-dollar project the whole province will have to pay for. And I don't think there's a lot of support for it outside of Quebec City, but nobody else cares. I
didn't hear anything about Bill 91. Did you?
Right now, pardon?
I didn't hear anything about Bill 91. Did you? Like the English language rights debate?
Outside of the weekend I spent in Montreal on the West Island, where I was served exclusively in English everywhere I went to shop, which is weird for me in Quebec. Like, I'm just so used to speaking French all the time, and I'm there and I'm like, hello, and they're like, hello. Not even bonjour, hi. No, but I mean, apart from in that area, and of course they're a little perturbed at the Liberals, who shot themselves in the foot with a proposed amendment that they themselves proposed. Everybody else was like, hey, that sounds great, we'll put that in. And then the Liberals went, wait, this screws the Anglophones, whoops. And then they tried to get it out and they couldn't because everybody else was happy with it. And that perhaps is what has been the final nail in the coffin for a lot of their seats in Laval. They're losing Vaudreuil right now, which is on the periphery of the periphery of their strength. They were last time I looked at it.
Most of the seats that the Liberals are winning right now are on the island of Montreal. They are winning one or two outside.
Yeah.
The CAC is at 94, you guys. 94 seats.
La CAC's winning by almost 1,000 votes in Vaudreuil.
So
whoa,
let's talk about these numbers that are coming in right now, and I don't want to talk about the seat count because seat count means nothing to me. I want to talk about the actual vote efficiency here because and these are numbers off of CBC and they're changing all the time. So I'm going to try and do this as quickly as possible. The CAC are leading with 42.7% and they have a majority of the seats. The Liberals are at 13.4% and they're official opposition. The Quebec Solidaire are at 14.3% and they have 11 seats. The one that shocks the heck out of me is the Parti Québécois, who have 15%. So they have the second highest vote totals, but they are leading and elected in 2 seats. And the one that I didn't know until God bless CBC, because I was listening to them before we started this, the Conservative Party of Quebec have 13.2% of the vote and they have no seats. This will be the very first time and yet again, because I watch CBC, save CBC, please. I've just lost about 12 of my followers. This is the first time since the ADQ, the preamble to the CAC, where the ADQ got 6% of the vote and they only got 1 seat. And that was a tragedy in that election. Now we are seeing a party with double that, 13.2%, and they are not getting any seat. Does this all come down to vote efficiency and where you're getting out your vote? Dan?
I mean, yes and no. If it's vote efficiency, it's something like, the way that federally the NDP can win 2 seats in Alberta. It's because all of the votes are really in a couple of ridings. Whereas with the PQ and the Conservatives, they're just widely spread out. There's just enough of them everywhere for them to register, but not enough support individually anywhere for them to really to win. I mean, in the Gatineau region right now, they're sitting overall in 3rd place. So they're actually doing well regionally. But yeah, there's not enough places for them to get over the hump. And for that, you need strong, well-known candidates if you're going to try to break out of that kind of a mold. But yeah, I mean, Duhane's not even winning his own seat right now. Yeah. And I mean, the PQ, that's been a long slide for a long time. And, La CAQ, and now the Conservatives have eaten their lunch because they've completely given up on anything progressive they've had forever. And I mean, Quebec Solidaire ate their lunch 2 elections ago on that. And they just haven't found anything new.
Sarah, what about yourself?
Somebody else said, there's sound bites and there's people are tired and they need something new. And what's the word, poignant, like something that's actually motivating. And I don't think anybody saw that in this election campaign.
No.
Is this a wake-up call to parties? Is this a wake-up call? Because this is the exact same thing that happened in the Ontario election. The Liberals got a little bit more vote in the overall vote total than the NDP, but the NDP got a lot more seats because the vote efficiency. Is this just come down to the parties didn't... Go ahead.
They're probably going to be calling for political reform first past the polls. Let's scrap it. And that would be
CBC was doing it literally before we got on. They had a pundit who was like, we need to change the vote. I was like, you say this all the time.
Well, let's not forget that CAC actually got elected after signing a deal with the other parties to bring in electoral reform.
Yeah.
And before the election in 2018, the only party that hadn't signed on was the Liberals. And then the Liberals suddenly got screwed by it. They signed on, and the CAC went, nah, we're not doing that.
We're
a little bit like Trudeau, 1,600 times electoral reform. He comes in and then doesn't do it.
Yeah.
And the thing is, the reason why electoral reform isn't happening is because people are letting governments who promise it get away with not doing it.
There's
End of story.
We're not holding the governments accountable anymore. And what we're seeing here is that voters went out, they voted, and they were like, could this get worse than what it is right now? No, we're doing all right. Let's vote for continuity, right? If Quebec Solidaire would be winning, everybody would like, oh no, we can't have Quebec Solidaire leading. They don't even have a leader. They have co-leaders and blah, blah, blah. And everybody would be losing their damn mind. But is it going to get worse than what we're seeing right now in Quebec? Probably not. And people don't want change right now. They just want stability.
So they want to be able to go out and see their friends and their family. And they don't give a shit about anything else.
I say that all the time to any politician who brings up the idea of proportional representation. I say everyone wants proportional representation until you win. And then once you win, I don't want it anymore, right? Because Wade McLaughlin and PEI
vote for it.
Well, exactly. Wade McLaughlin, they held a referendum and they didn't even follow through on it. Dalton McGuinty, they held a referendum.
The referendum's a different story, and private interests and big power players and things. And in Ontario, let's not forget the way they passed that law. The referendum was happening at the same time as the provincial election, but provincial politicians, and their campaigns, it was illegal for them to talk about it. I was running lists and data for Peter Tabin's campaign in Toronto Danforth, and we couldn't, for the love of God, even talk about the referendum. And that was, by the way, that riding was one of the only places the referendum passed by a large margin. And you know what? It was because Conservatives and Liberals in that riding felt disenfranchised because their people never got in. So they, like the New Democrats and the Greens, voted in favor of it. But when your choice is always enfranchised, why change?
I want to turn to the big story now, and that is, what implications does this have federally? We are seeing a diminished, and I say diminished because they are at 21 seats leading and elected now, the Quebec Liberal Party. We are seeing a Conservative Party who, let's be honest, we just saw a federal campaign run where the Conservatives ran against a former Liberal premier. We are seeing the coalition, the CAC, who endorsed tepidly Aaron O'Toole in the last election, to say we'd rather work with Aaron O'Toole than Justin Trudeau. What implications does this vote tonight? And I know it's still early on, but we are in the territory of a larger majority. They are leading and elected in 78 seats now. They are leading in 13 seats. They have a total of 91 seats. What implications does this vote tonight have? Because if I'm Justin Trudeau, I'm looking at this Quebec Liberal vote and I'm going, what the hell is going on with the Quebec wing? Because if the Quebec wing is doing bad, federally they're going to do bad. Dan, Sarah, who wants to take? Sarah, you want to take this one? Dan, do you want to take this one?
So no,
Sarah, go for it.
Here's the thing. We need to start making the difference between populism and conservatism. That's number one. A lot of the conservatism we're seeing at the federal level right now is clinging a little bit more on the populism side than conservatism side. We'll see how Poilievre's going to fare out. But when with the truckers and it's fascinating to watch though, because the conservatives were yelling at the clouds because the vaccines were not coming out in enough, fast enough, soon enough. And then they managed to campaign on freedom of not getting vaccinated and personal responsibility. That is fascinating to me, and how they pivoted during that period of time. But, could Trudeau be in trouble? No, I don't think.
Like, Dan,
we usually
go
elect
ahead, Sarah.
opposites in Quebec. We usually elect opposites in Quebec. So if it's a conservative government, it's usually a liberal government, federal, and then can do the switcheroo once in a while. But the question I have is Mr. Legault's CAQ is the same kind of conservative that Mr. Poilievre is showing us right now, right? That's not our question I don't think it's the same conservatism. Mr. Legault, I would argue that he's not a populist. It's just a conservative.
I would agree with that, and I think what we've seen so far from Poilievre is more of the Duhaime popularism than La CAQ, but there's definitely overlap. There's definitely a strong segment of La CAQ voter that is a conservative voter and that could be swayed by the populism. There's no doubt. And lots of people from all demographics. There's a reason why Doug Ford went after some union voters in some areas in Ontario, and why Poilievre is signaling similar things. Because among working class people, there's not a solidarity of class. There's a whole lot of things that different people care about, from economic justice to social justice to libertarian freedom in those areas. It's all over the place, and certain segments can be swayed in different ways to maybe maybe because you're a freedom lover, you can be convinced to vote against your economic interests more easily. If you're social justice warrior, you are not going to be swayed by this false freedom, but you might be swayed by a lesbian conservative going out and swinging and hitting a home run of a speech about Iran and women's rights.
A lesbian
that one might get
Jewish,
you.
A lesbian Jewish conservative.
Yes. Right? That one might sway you. If you are, in seeking of economic justice, and maybe Poilievre supporting the GST rebate but not dental care works for you. They're trying a lot of different things federally and seeing what hits the wall and where they can attract people that are not traditionally conservative voters, maybe, or that at one time have been but have strayed. And I think that Quebec is not that dissimilar from the rest of the country in having that wide variety of people. And I mean, there's a big worker shortage in Quebec. If Poilievre can make a play for actually fixing recognition of credentials and things for everybody that's already there, which he has promised, as every government has promised for the last 20 years, but nobody wants to do the hard work with the provinces to make it happen. But yeah, so I mean, he can certainly to play that up and win a lot of seats. La CAQ is showing, I think, that there's certainly a path to victory for conservatives if they seek out Quebec. But it's kind of like in the NDP between how do you keep the socialists while attracting more social democrats. I think in the Conservative Party, it's going to be how do you attract the Quebecers without losing the Westerners?
Well, because Quebec has Bill 91, Bill 26, Bill 21, Bill 96. That can go
disgusting.
Which are thank you. Okay, I didn't want to be out of line, but it's fucking gross. And then that goes against the federal immigration policies, and being and just let people be, really, leave people alone at some point. But I think that if, a lot of people agree with Bill 96 and Bill 21 in Quebec, and Polyev comes in, he's like, no, let's go, and Quebec's gonna try to control their immigration, I think that's where they could have a problem. That could be a huge issue, because the federal is going to be saying one thing, the provincial is going to be saying one thing, then there's going to be a power struggle to see who's going to win on the immigration side and which way they're going to do it.
I pick a Quebec government over the federal government 97 out of 100 times in that fight.
Yep.
I want to
regardless of what the issue is.
I want to follow up on that, because you raise an interesting point, particularly with everything going on in the Confederation right now. Pierre Poilievre has a brand issue in Quebec compared to Alberta, compared to downtown Toronto, and a conservative in Quebec and a conservative in Alberta and conservative in BC and downtown Toronto are completely different. When you have two very big personalities like Doug Ford and Francois Legault, who are both quote unquote conservatives, does this spell trouble for Pierre when you have to balance that out to say, while they are their premiers, we won't overstep boundaries on what's going on provincially, I have to make nice with all the conservatives in each part of the provinces without pissing them off by declaring support for a Bill 96 or a bill that Doug Ford puts forward. It is, and I know we're talking about Pierre a lot right now, it's just because this has implications on what his path forward in Quebec is going to look like, but also with Ontario voting the way it did earlier this year, this is kind of a unknown charter that he is going to have to do. With Stephen Harper, he had John Charest and Dalton McGuinty up against them, so you didn't really have conflicting conservative / liberal, or conservatives and conservative conflicting policies being put forward.
Well, but what you did have in 2015 was, it's not Harper. In 2015, you had sympathetic liberal governments in Ontario and Quebec that were instrumental in helping to turn a 36-member caucus into the next government of Canada. And while Ontario and Quebec do generally vote opposite at the federal and provincial level, there's times when they line up right before they switch the other way again. Yeah. And I think that's where Poilievre has an opportunity if he can make nice with Ford and he can make nice with Legault.
Can you make nice with Ford?
Probably promise them. Of course you can make nice with Ford.
Because Ford and Trudeau look like they're best friends every time they're at an event.
With Ford.
The thing with Poilievre,
it's very easy. Just ask the lobbyists. They've made nice with Ford.
Oh yes, I'm super friendly with them. Always good business. But the thing is that Poilievre's going to have to hire different people to handle different files and bring new blood.
He has to hire Legault and Ford people.
And not Harper people.
He's got Jenny Byrne. He's covered there.
He has Jenny Byrne. But the thing is that they're, it's kind of 50 shades of blue, right? Everybody's different. But the thing is that if Poilievre just wants to be able to win this, is that he's going to have to be extremely, extremely, extremely careful in Quebec. And he's going to need people that understand how Quebec works and how Quebec reacts and how Quebec acts. Because if he doesn't do that, and he's going to be doing the same way, the same politics that work here don't work in Quebec. And that's what we've been trying to explain for years, is that Quebec is a very, very special political environment, and you need to approach it in a certain way.
You will have to have Harper-like discipline. Sorry to interrupt.
Yeah, no, it's fine. Exactly. You're going to have discipline, because if not, Quebecers won't bite.
I want to turn to the other federal leader, and I'm going to pick up on what we're talking about, because I'm just looking at time and I want to make sure I get this part in here. The Bloc Québécois, Yves-François Blanchet. This is not a good night for the separatist movement within Quebec. Even with the Quebec Solidaire and the Parti Québécois, this is not a good night for the separatist movement. and I asked this to the gentleman who came on my show on Friday we'll throw it over to you. Oh,
Sorry.
Go ahead, Sarah.
The Liberal leader just got reelected, so she kept her seat.
We'll talk about that in 2 seconds, but I want to pose this question here for a second.
Yeah.
Parti Québécois and the Bloc Québécois are a separatist movement. This election tonight shows me that the separatist movement, while not officially extinguished, it is not as burning as bright as it was in the 90s or even in the 80s. Does Yves-François Blanchet, however you pronounce his name, the leader of the party of the Bloc Québécois in the House of Commons, have to change tack on what is going on right now? Dan, let's throw it over to you for a second.
I don't think he does, because the Bloc Québécois, while they are separatists and everybody knows that about them, they don't really talk about it much, or have to talk about it much, or have to talk about how they're going to go about to bring a referendum, because they're not the provincial government. All they have to do is say and make a case for themselves that we are Quebec, and we are the only ones that are going to have Quebec's interests at heart in Ottawa. They don't have to accomplish anything ever.
Does that work, though? Does that work?
In fact, oftentimes when they can sabotage the House of Commons, it works out better for them, because they show it as dysfunctional. Well, I mean, it works and it doesn't. I mean, it worked throughout the 90s and 2000s. The NDP eviscerated them in 2011, and then it started coming back in 2015 with some really, really racist advertising, and then it. Like the last election, they were heading down again until somebody in English said something stupid, and then they were right back up in it.
That debate screwed us over.
Poor campaign. That they need one debate or one Anglophone somewhere in the country to say something dumb per election to make a reason for their own existence. That's all it takes. Yeah.
I remember that.
It's a bad night for them. It's a bad night for them, because there's not going to be any provincial resources that they'll be able to tap into to help with their federal stuff. But apart from that, I don't think it changes much in Blanchet's life.
Sarah, let's turn, because we're coming up at the 50-minute mark now, and I want to make sure we get out of here in an hour, so that way you guys can have a relaxing night, because Dan is 2 hours ahead of us, so it's coming up to 10 o'clock. I'm not sure if Dad needs to go to sleep, because kids are going to be up early for school tomorrow.
Not yet, but
okay,
I'll be able to do one or two things for myself before bed.
There you go. I'm going to ask this, Sarah, let's throw this one to you, because and I don't want to put you on the spot because of what you're going through work-wise with the leadership campaign, but if your party goes into an election with 27 seats and you are expected to come out with about 20, and you just got reelected as the Liberal leader did, Dominique, I forget her last name right now, Anglade. Anglade. There's been reports that she's going to stick around. She's staying on as leader because it gives her time to grow the party, because they really didn't have a leadership election. If you were her, are you looking at this result and saying, this was my doing, I have to step down and I have to take a back seat in this next 4 years, or are you staying on?
Yeah. The party was already hurting when it was handed over to her. They like to cycle through leadership quite fast over the years, I would say. Let's give her another term. Let's see how she does in the opposition, or let's give her 2 years. She's still the leader of the opposition, right? She's not really losing, the voting power is not there anymore, but she is still the leader of the opposition. And I was talking to some pollsters in Quebec last weekend. They were worried she would not be able to keep her seat. So she really worked hard to keep that seat, and we'll give her that. Give it a little bit of time, see how caucus feels. Like, they're doing okay. They're not doing great, but they're not doing too bad. They're still the official opposition. Let's give it some time. We need to stop overreacting, and the very next day, like, leaders just stepping down because
But haven't we come to that though, Sarah? Haven't we? And I apologize for interrupting. Haven't we? And
no, it's fine. We
and
don't
I say
have
that
any
with
patience for it.
sheer.
We don't have any patience for incompetence anymore or for failure.
Are we not at
That's why we're
one kick at the can situation now?
yeah.
Sheer.
That's why we're cycling through conservative leaders every 2-3 years. It's because as soon as they don't deliver, they go.
Last weekend, Jagmeet Singh just, by the way, celebrated his 5th anniversary of leader of Canada's NDP. And with one major exception, and that's a whole topic on its own, I'm very happy that the NDP has always typically given leaders 3 or 4 election campaigns, roughly a decade. Because
Thomas care. What? Who said that?
we're not one of the 2 governing parties, and so we have to. Our leaders need more time for voters to learn to trust them, I guess.
How long was it? How long was Jack leader?
Jack Layton was on his 4th. He was on his 4th campaign. Everybody internally in the party thought he was going to be, there's going to be calls for his resignation after 3, but that he's done after 4 elections. That's internally, that's what people figured. Andrew Horvath, maybe it was supposed to be 2014, but she managed to rally the troops, and then 2018 happened, which was great for the party. So that's why she was able to stay on. Jagmeet's been there five years and a couple campaigns already. If the Liberals really, two campaigns, 2019 and
last one, right?
21, right? Like, I mean, it is in a very short period of time, as Sarah said earlier. But yeah, the Liberal leader, if the Liberals want to grow, they're in a smaller, diminished positions now, but they should, I think, allow their leader to stay on. My God, should we actually in this country show a little bit of support for a female political leader that was, put into a position that nobody else wanted, that was going to lose, and then actually stick by her. But the other thing is, as we mentioned earlier, there's no third party in the National Assembly anymore. That means that virtually every single question the opposition, the larger opposition gets to ask is going to go to the Liberals. Very few questions will go to Quebec Solidaire or to the PQ.
It's like
so there's actually
it's a 2-party system.
Yeah, but for the Liberals, even though they're diminished, they have less seats, they'll actually have more time to speak than they did before. So they'll have the opportunity to make a bigger impact.
So are they more looking at the seats than
being impactful in parliaments and legislatures? That's where they don't seem to do terribly well. But if they put the effort in and did it, they could actually make themselves the government in waiting for when La CAQ fails.
So if I was a Liberal tonight in Quebec, I'm looking at these results as, while not the best, relatively okay, because you're still official opposition and you still get the money, you still get the funding, you still get the party funding, right? Like, is that the consensus here?
Yeah. I mean, there's going to be a little bit less of it, but there's also less competition from the other parties.
So right now there is only one official, 2 that I know. The party, the Green Party of Quebec, their leader went down in defeat. And I see both the looks that I just got there, everyone.
Shocking.
So I'm pretty sure everyone just saw that look.
Okay, we have to talk party slogans just for a moment after you're done this.
Yeah, which I don't know what the party slogans are because I didn't pay that much attention. I didn't go into that detail here. But Gabrielle Nadeau-Dubois, the leader of one of the co-leaders of the Quebec Solidaire, has been elected. Francois Legault has been elected. Dominique Anglade has been elected. Eric Dumaine, the leader of the Conservative Party of Quebec, has gone down in defeat. And right now, we are waiting on the leader of the Parti Québécois, Paul Saint-Pierre Paladon, or PSPP, as he's more commonly referred to in Quebec, is trailing, but only 28 of 173 polls are reporting, which I still don't understand why there's 173 polls in a riding. In Alberta, there's like 12, and that seems like a lot to me. Anyway, So those are the leaders that we are looking at right now. But Dan, let's throw it over to you. What about this campaign slogans?
12 polls. Ouch. That makes for a lot of lines. I don't know. No, I mean, it boils down to this word, vrai. Every party had real.
I was like really hoping that wasn't a mirror image. I was like, Ivan, what's
Quebec,
Ivan?
like the PQ pour un Québec qui s'assume pour vrai. Like, what have you guys been faking it the whole time before now? Like, and then you have the Liberal slogan, voter pour vrai, vote for real. What? Has this been an illusion all this time beforehand? Now it's real?
It was a dream.
Yeah.
Dan,
and it was just like, and like I've gone off on a tangent here. I've forgotten the other ones, but it was just kind
The
of like
CAQ is now our record.
Yeah, vrai. Okay, like I think vrai was in there somewhere, but it was just like you've all discovered the word real. Justin Trudeau, that worked for him in 2015. Yeah, real change. Didn't turn out to be real change, but yeah. I'm just like, that's how bad the election was. Like 3 of the parties used the same word in their slogan and it all meant nothing. And that's how much effort was put into, I guess, the campaign.
Here we are.
But congratulations to the CAC.
Exactly.
They got what needed to be done. They proved as a new party between 2018 that they could be, generally speaking, maybe not on electoral reform, but generally speaking, held to their word. They accomplished in La Loi 21, which I despise, they accomplished what both Liberal and PQ governments were unable to accomplish in the past, which was some kind of Quebecer law that brought enough people together. And then the pandemic, they were generally decisive. They were a little bit hard-headed at times, but consistent. People knew what to expect. And I mean, it sucked for lots of us, but I mean, I'm sitting in my, all the other problems that we have and not enough doctors and all the rest. But like, I'm sitting in my pantry right now with 9 boxes of rapid test kits that are extras that were delivered to us through school and through daycare. And I mean, these are the extra ones we haven't used. And like, I've sent a dozen boxes to family and friends in Ontario that couldn't get Jack back home.
Yeah.
They succeeded in many areas. Old age folks homes was an absolute unmitigated disaster when COVID hit, but that was the PQ and the Liberals' fault for 20 years of not funding them.
Have you read the book, Alec Castonguay's book?
Not yet.
No. So Alec is, I know Alec pretty well, and I'm just rereading it because I wanted to understand a few things that happened, and it's heartbreaking to see what happened in those long-term care facilities. Like, it's heartbreaking. Like, I had an aunt, she was going to turn 100. She was a great aunt, and she was on Montreal South Shore, and she was talking to my mother on the Sunday night. She was like, oh, there was a lot of people going to the 6th floor, and 6th floor was the COVID floor, and she was still on her floor because she didn't have COVID. 3 days later, she passed of COVID. That's how brutal it was in there. But
the Quebec old age folk system's been having a lot of troubles for a long time. I mean, it's terrible to think, but remember, not that many years ago, Gilles Ducep's mother ended up in a mishap outside and froze to death, I think it was.
Yeah, she froze to death. She passed.
Yeah, so I mean, the system's been hurting for a long time, like a lot of systems are. We could certainly argue different solutions, which we should argue at some point, because it's not being discussed enough at all levels of government, and people are able to ignore it as long as people let them. And this is what happened with electoral reform, and this is what's happening with a lot of things in government. It's very polarized, it's very partisan, and the partisans are willing to let a lot of shit slide from their own people that they wouldn't let slide with the others. And lots of people are tired and just not caring anymore, and lots of people have completely lost faith in the system entirely. and are just not even standing up to be counted anymore.
Yeah.
There's no simple fix, and there's no single solution to all these myriad of problems. But if we want to get things done, people are going to have to get lively. It's as simple as that.
We are at the hour mark, ladies and germs. I want to thank Dan and Sarah for both doing this. I know we did not expect this to not be one of those nights where we didn't expect going into this what the results were going to be, but here we are. We are leading and elected for the CAC at 90 seats. For the Liberals, they are at 22 seats, so down 5 seats from the last election so far.
But up where they've been all night.
Yep, the Quebec Solidaire is at 11 seats. They are up 1 seat from dissolution. The big, I would say, losers of the night, and I say that with respect to them, the Parti Québécois is leading and elected in 2 seats, down from 10 seats at dissolution. Sarah, Dan, thank you so much. I know it was a very lively hour discussion. I could not have asked for 2 better people to come join me for an hour on a Monday night to talk about Quebec politics. So thank you so much.
Even more with the Parti Québécois, they're reduced to la région de Gaspésie.
Yeah, that's it.
That's where both those seats are.
Yeah.
Which means,
and those are seats
what?
they held in 2011 federally when they were reduced to 4 seats.
Yeah.
The south shore of the St. Lawrence into the Gulf of the Atlantic is where those 2 seats are.
You know what, the big rock with the hole in the middle?
Yep.
Merci. It was on the quarter.
That one.
There.
Yep.
Well, there you go. You learn some geography when you come to the cross-border interviews with Chris Brown. So there you go. So with that, I want to remind everyone, thanks everyone for tuning in. It's been great. We had someone from Brazil say, go Montreal Canadiens because of Dan's jersey. So thank you from Brazil for paying attention to us.
Lula.
I can imagine you guys had an amazing night this weekend with the round 2 of voting going on here soon. And I want to remind everyone, we are live again Thursday night for the leadership of the United Conservative Party of Alberta. That's right. We are going
Good
live.
luck with that one, Sarah, getting through that, I mean.
Thank you.
I didn't say it, Sarah. He did. Ow, my nose. Anyway, so I'm going to leave before I hurt myself even more. So with that, I want to remind everyone, put down your social media phone for at least 5 minutes a day and go have a conversation with somebody. It helps our province.
Grass.
What?
Touch grass. That's what they say to the gamers.
Yeah, well, I don't. I wrote a whole book that you're in, Dan. You are literally in the book. Thanks for picking it up. I want to thank everyone for tuning in for another great edition of the Cross Border Interviews Live Special 2022 Quebec General Election Results Show. Have yourself an excellent day. And remember, everyone, keep talking.